Hello, Vincent Carroll speaking. This is tutorial number 18, psoriasis from an acupuncture point of view. Psoriasis is one of the great diseases of antiquity. It has been described by many ancient civilizations, but yet from a Western medical point of view, the best we're able to say is that it is an autoimmune condition with a genetic basis to it. From an acupuncture point of view, I often see psoriasis as two separate conditions, and they each follow a very different pathway, and they each require a very different form of treatment. First of all, how does it present? Well, it presents as scaly skin, very often distributed over particular areas, such as the elbows, for example, various creases, the scalp in particular. These are areas that tend to be affected by psoriasis. Very often it tends to be itchy and very often it tends to be flaky, but not always. And this is what I mean by saying, from an acupuncture point of view, they're often two separate diseases. The first condition tends to be the more classic scaly, flaky, dry skin. The person generally has a condition of heat. From an acupuncture point of view, we would consider heat in the blood. From a treatment point of view, we would consider spleen 10 bilaterally, because this is a deep toxic heat. This is not just a heat that's come from the exterior. This is a heat that's been in the interior for a long, long while. And it perhaps over years, and it waxes and wanes. It exacerbates and it remits, very often based upon the addition of heat. And that heat is often mental, emotional heat. So from a Western medical point of view, we talk in terms of stress exacerbating psoriasis. From an acupuncture point of view, we could think in terms of heat generated by the stagnation of qi, creating a pressure cooker effect, producing heat, and heat again, added to heat, manifests on the skin, which is the great cooling surface of the body. So very often the skin can be very flaky. I've often had patients that when they've left the room, I've had to get out the Hoover, because very often the scales and the flakes fall on the floor in abundance. And these are people who show all the signs of heat, of very full heat, dry, itchy eyes, itchy scalp, flaky scalp, very often yang rising as well, in the form of migraine headache or other forms of tension, grinding one's teeth in bed at night or whatever associated with liver in excess. So there's fire, there's heat, and it manifests onto the skin, and very often that's one form of psoriasis. The other form of psoriasis is damp. Damp psoriasis tends not to be as scratchy. In fact, it mightn't even be itchy at all. But large patches of skin can peel off, a bit like shedding one's skin, if you like, and it tends to be damp. And this is the form of, again, there's an element of heat, but there's a much greater element of damp. And depending on the amount of heat, there is itch, and depending on the amount of damp, there's a lack of pain and there's a peeling away of surfaces. And very often that happens. People may peel off areas of skin, and fresh skin, again with psoriasis, tends to be underneath it. And there's this sort of revolving cycle that happens. And that's damp, if you like, damp on the skin, producing a different type of psoriasis. In my own practice, it's roughly 50-50. I mean, roughly 50% of people present with the full-on blazing heat with the flaky skin, and the other 50% seem to come with the sort of, I suppose, disfigurement of large areas, large patches of psoriasis, but for the psoriasis to be relatively painless, not particularly itchy, damp and wet, and peels away. Where does all this come from? From an acupuncture point of view, there could be a prehepanescence deficiency involving lung. Difficult to prove that one, and more difficult to do something about it from a permanent point of view. Very often the heat can come from the exterior, and it's manifested by mental emotional issues generating heat in the body. But sometimes it actually can come from the exterior, and that's quite debatable. I've come across cases where people might have suddenly got a great shock. I had one particular person, and the stiletto heel of one person stood on top of the instep of the victim, who subsequently got psoriasis. And that psoriasis covered over 70% of her body, but it was sort of a damp type of psoriasis. So what happened there was a sudden amount of excruciating pain leading to shock, and shock damaged the kidney, and kidney undermined both lung, which is of course for skin quality, and also the spleen as well, and its ability to transform fluid. So I'm sort of guessing that from this particular person's point of view, because I can think of no other reason. There was no family history of psoriasis or anything like that. So look for a reason. Not that a reason is going to necessarily help you from a treatment point of view, because you have to treat from what you see, from where you begin. So the broad division is whether or not this is full-on heat causing flakiness, where heat is taken out, or whether it is a dampness. And in that case, you have to support the spleen. You have to support the spleen's ability to transform fluid, meaning spleen 9 bilaterally, as well as tonifying, of course, the root-opposed heaven chi, spleen 6, stomach 36, ren 12, plus the source point of the spleen, spleen 3 as well, and enhance it with a kidney tonifier as well. That's what I'd recommend for that. But for the other full-on heat with the flaky scalp, flaky everything, drag it down as well. Try dragging down the spring points of virtually everything. I mean, gallbladder 43, stomach 44, urinary bladder 66, liver 2, so on and so forth, both sides, because you really want to pull heat down off the face, especially off the scalp. But take heat out that's deep and toxic with spleen 10 bilaterally as well, plus all the usual suspects, large intestine 4, large intestine 11, Sanja number 6, which will take heat out, and avoid mental emotional stuff that's likely to generate heat. So therefore, from an acupuncture point of view, 2 separate conditions. From a Western medical point of view, 1 poorly understood condition. Thank you.